Let's meet a thinker who carried French post-structuralist ideas across the Atlantic, Barbara Johnson. She was an American critic, translator, and Harvard professor, and she played a key role in making Jacques Derrida's deconstruction accessible to English-speaking academia. Pause here and note this carefully. Barbara Johnson is often linked to the Yale School of Literary Criticism, along with Paul Deman, Jeffrey Hartman, and J. Hillis Miller. This has been asked in exam, so keep it in mind. Her work blended deconstruction, Lacanian psychoanalysis, and feminist theory, always showing how language creates instability and opens space for multiple meanings. Now, here's the golden trick. Johnson repeatedly reminded her readers that deconstruction is not destruction. She said it does not proceed by random doubt. It challenges domination by one mode of signifying. These quotations have been asked in recent exams, so they are must-remember lines. In other words, she believed that the shifting, contradictory nature of language could be politically enabling rather than paralyzing. Can you recall how Derrida spoke about difference, the endless deferral of meaning? Johnson took that further into questions of translation. In her essay, Taking Fidelity Philosophically, she argued that since language is already fractured, translation can never be perfect, but it is still necessary. Translation, for her, was always a negotiation between what cannot be said and what new meanings can be created. Her major works also give you exam-worthy points. In A World of Difference, published in 1987, she linked deconstruction to politics, showing that undecidability in text is never neutral, it always carries consequences. In the Wake of Deconstruction, published in 1994, she reflected on the backlash against deconstruction, connecting it with feminist debates and the politics of responsibility. And in her essay, Writing from 1990, she explored Roland Barthes, Derrida, and Lacan to argue that writing or écriture remains central to how meaning multiplies. Pause here and note this down. Johnson's contribution was bridging European theory with American academia. She showed that deconstruction was not an abstract game, but a powerful interpretive practice that could challenge domination and make room for marginalized voices. As Harold Schweizer once put it in his introduction to the Wake of Deconstruction, her work tried to delay the inevitable reductionist desire for meaning, keeping interpretation open and ethically alive. Let's decode another major figure of deconstruction, Paul Deman. Born in Belgium, Deman became one of the most important voices of literary theory in the 20th century, standing right alongside Jacques Derrida. In fact, their intellectual friendship began at the famous Johns Hopkins Conference in 1966, where Derrida delivered his essay Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of the Human Sciences. While Derrida rooted deconstruction in philosophy and linguistics, Paul Deman brought it directly into literary criticism. He focused especially on romantic and post-romantic poetry, reading authors like Wordsworth, Keats, Rousseau, Nietzsche, Rilke, Proust, Blanchot, Kant, Walter Benjamin, and even W.B. Yeats. His contribution was sharp. He showed how literary texts often undo their own claims to coherence, leaving behind contradictions and rhetorical blind spots. His first big book, Criticism and Crisis, in 1967, argued that literature means nothing. In a fixed sense, it exposes how unstable the link between sign and meaning really is. Then came Blindness and Insight in 1971, later revised in 1983, where he critiqued new criticism and showed how critics are often blind to the very rhetorical moves that shape their insight. Next came Allegories of Reading in 1979, where Deman unpacked figural language in writers like Nietzsche and Proust, proving how metaphors and meaning are always in tension. In The Rhetoric of Romanticism, published in 1984, he shook up romantic studies by showing that symbols and metaphors don't guarantee unity. In fact, romantic texts often unravel their own claims. And finally, his posthumous masterpiece, The Resistance to Theory, appeared in 1986, where he argued that literary study must confront the unsettling power of language itself. This work is often quoted as saying resistance to theory is really resistance to language. Deman's criticism shifted attention away from literature as expression or imitation and placed it firmly on rhetoric, showing that meaning is undecidable. Derrida summed it up beautifully. Deconstruction is a testing of the impossible. Let's decode another giant of theory, J. Hillis Miller. He was an American critic who stood right at the heart of the Yale School of Deconstruction. Pause here and note this. The Yale School included Paul de Man, Jacques Derrida, Jeffrey Hartman, and Harold Bloom. And this fact was asked in exams. Educated at Harvard, Miller later taught at Johns Hopkins University and Yale, where he helped shape literary theory into a major force in American academia. His central idea was simple, but radical words don't point to fixed external meanings. Instead, they form an endless web of connections where meaning is always shifting. He once said deconstruction was like finding the thread in the text that will unravel it all. Miller showed that every text has two levels, the clear, surface meaning, and then a hidden counter meaning that resists or contradicts the first. And this, he argued, is what makes reading so exciting. Texts never stop producing new meanings. One of his most important essays was The Critic as Host, written in 1976. This was his reply to M.H. Abrams' essay, The Deconstructive Angel. Abrams had accused deconstructive critics of being parasites on texts, but Miller flipped the metaphor. He argued that the critic is not a parasite but a host, someone who generates new insights and keeps literature alive. Instead of calling language a prison house, he called it a place of joy, where critics can celebrate multiple readings. Another key moment came in 1986 at the Modern Language Association. Miller delivered his lecture Triumph of Theory, where he analyzed Shelley's The Triumph of Life. Pause here. This example of Shelley's poem connected with theory was asked in exam, so keep it marked. His point was that theory and literature can never be separated. Each reshapes the other. Can you recall what makes his reading special? He applied deconstruction to both American and British writers, especially Romantic and Victorian literature. His readings were not about locking down a single interpretation, but about showing the tensions, gaps, and contradictions that live inside texts. This one's important. Miller kept reminding us that meaning is not something we extract like an object from a box. Instead, meaning is a continuous play of words, always expanding, always surprising. By doing this, he extended Derrida's legacy right into the heart of American literary study. So, when you hear J. Hillis Miller's name, remember him as the critic who not only defended deconstruction but also turned reading into a creative, joyful act. He remains central to how literary theory was institutionalized in the United States during the late 20th century. And that wraps up Chapter 14, Deconstruction Unlocked. In this journey, we decoded the big names and ideas from Martin Heidegger and Edmund Husserl to Jacques Derrida, Barbara Johnson, Paul de Man, and J. Hillis Miller. We also saw how the Yale School made deconstruction one of the most powerful critical movements of the 20th century. Now, don't just stop at listening. Practice with actual exam questions. Many of these thinkers, their quotes, and even the chronology of their works have already been asked in exams. So, if you want all the PDF notes for this chapter along with carefully organized previous year questions, just download our app. It's the easiest way to revise smart and prepare with confidence. Pause here and make sure you have your notes ready, because in the next chapter, we'll be moving deeper into modern critical approaches.